am apparently a YouTube genie this week. You requested, and I might cover it. Yesterday, in response to my video on Shoe on Head's coverage of the Democrats, another subscriber asked me to make a response video to a recent release from Steven Crowder on tariffs. And you can tell in this exchange where they really got me. This person said, come on, talk some shit about mercantilism. And I was like, okay, all right, you got me. I'm in. So now I've done it. I went and waded into the swamp for 25 minutes to see what he had to say. The things I do for you people. No, but really, I appreciate you guys weighing in. I love hearing your thoughts and what topics interest you. And I really did kind of need the assist this week. My brain is fried from my new video every weekday schedule. Do you know how hard it is to be interesting and entertaining every day? I think you can tell by my hat, right? I am ready for the holidays. So thanks for the inspo assist. So today we are going to talk about Crowder's video, The Truth About Trump's Massive Tariffs. Let's see what he got right, what he got wrong, and how our whole economic fate is looking once Trump is sworn in. First, I'm Hannah Cox with Based Politics. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we dive in today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. So this was admittedly the first Steven Crowder video I ever watched, and I must begrudgingly admit I found him entertaining. I have followed his ex-wife's journey via Twitter, as well as that of one of his former employees, enough to withstand his charisma. I still don't like him, but I get why he's popular. He has very good accents, very good impressions. He does seem to be very similar to many others who once considered themselves to be libertarians or limited government advocates, real capitalists. He is still somewhat friendly to the talking points, but he seems to have thrown in the towel and is ready for a strong man. He incorrectly blames failures of capitalism for the problems around him versus government interventions into the market in the first place. And that, again, is very common, particularly among the MAGA base. And I just think it shows a failure to understand public policy, its consequences, and how to trace back problems to their root causes. And this is especially evident when you look at the MAGA base's sentiments towards trade. The trade dispute plays to this group's nationalist instincts, which are populist. I swear to God, if one more person tries to argue with me about this in the comments, this is basic political theory, okay? You could actually just go use your two thumbs to Google it and garner a political theory 101 understanding of the world instead of arguing in the comments of YouTube. And it would really go a long way, because when you cannot even understand the very basic definitions of ideologies and commonly used words in political discourse, you drag the entire equation down. It's like having to go back and teach somebody to read before they can start writing essays in college. So here is your very brief but very needed political economic 101 lesson for the day that you are going to need to engage in this discussion. Nationalism aligns with populism because both appeal to the people as a unified group that opposes elites or outsiders. Populist rhetoric often frames the nation under threat, whether that be economically, culturally, or politically, and calls for a return to the true national identity or greatness that a country once had. Nationalism's emotional and identity-based nature makes it a very fertile tool for mobilizing broad populist support, as it tends to resonate with common grievances and a desire for empowerment against external forces or internal elites. It is different than patriotism, which is merely taking pride in one's country, and patriotism does not require asserting dominance over others or rejecting global cooperation. Nationalism, in contrast, is baked in protectionism, which is inherently anti-capitalist. Now, this is one of many reasons I've long argued that Trump is not a capitalist. I actually may make a whole video on this because I get a lot of pushback and questions when I say this, but it is demonstrably true. His economic views are better summarized under the term mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic theory, and its policies are focused on maximizing a nation's wealth and power by regulating trade and accumulating precious metals like gold and silver. This is historically because it wasn't really used in the past 200 years. It's fallen out of popularity. It promotes exporting more than importing in order to try to create trade surpluses, and it often does that through government intervention and tariffs. Mercantilism is is not capitalist. And it's not capitalist because it relies on heavy government intervention to regulate trade, protect domestic industries, and accumulate wealth through trade surpluses rather than fostering free markets and individual enterprise, which would be capitalism. Capitalism, by contrast, emphasizes private property, minimal state interference, and market-driven competition. Mercantilism was historically a failure as it ended up stifling innovation and led to inefficient economies. And its rigid focus on trade balance and state control was replaced during the 18th and 19th centuries thanks to capitalism, once you saw the Wealth of Nations by Adam Smith began to take hold. And it is capitalism which has driven economic growth and industrialization through freer trade and competition. Okay, now that we've got our basic terms in order, let's proceed. Crowder opens the video with this mind-blowingly crazy take.
Okay, so if you agree there need to be some consequences for these other countries, including China, here's your choice. War or economic leverage? Pick one. You can't do nothing.
Honey, war or economic consequences is not a binary, but rather typically cause and effect. Like, my dude, most wars America has been in were the result of economic consequences, often including tariffs that escalated. The War of 1812 was partly driven by British trade restrictions and the impressment of American sailors. The American Civil War was influenced by economic tensions between the industrial North and agricultural South, with tariffs being a significant point of contention. And also, economic factors, including tariffs and trade imbalances, played significant roles in the world wars, though they were not the sole causes, of course. But in World War I, you had economic competition and colonial rivalries exacerbated by tensions between European powers. And in World War II, you had significant economic instability, particularly the Great Depression, which contributed to the rise of aggressive nationalism in Germany. And Hitler's economic policies, including protectionism and the need for resources, also influenced military expansion. So while wars are often a result from a mix of factors, economic issues like tariffs and trade restrictions obviously can escalate tensions that eventually lead to conflict. So, like, what are you smoking here? Trade wars are really merely a way of ratcheting up Cold Wars, which often leads to actual wars. And they're also futile. We're gearing up Cold Wars in the midst of escalating global tensions as it is, instead of addressing the elephant in the room, the actual root cause of the problem here, which is that the US is undercutting itself with idiotic labor policies and anti-capitalist BS that is creating the entire problem to begin with. If it was more affordable to make things in America, if American companies were not being hamstrung by moronic regulations, then we would be less dependent on other countries for our basic products and services. Like, this is basic supply and demand. If the demand could be satiated here in the US and the products that our companies were able to make were not only of quality but affordable, then the demand for global products would decrease. Thus, there would be no ability for those countries to levy tariffs against us, and it would induce more competition and a better climate for free trade to succeed within. Now, the next thing Steven Crowder says that I want to address is he goes on this rant that is basically just the typical defense of Trump.
The more you understand what's happening with the tariffs, the more you would likely support it. I'm not saying that you're, as a left would, you're just ignorant or uninformed. If you understand that it's not about tariffs, and a lot of Americans may not know this, that a lot of tariffs were threatened in the first Trump administration. Some were implemented, but not all of them. Okay, so you're hearing economists say these tariffs, it's going to be an increase of costs, increase in costs in goods and services. Okay, but the main point to remember is they're a negotiating tactic. And they're a negotiating tactic that works because Donald Trump does understand leverage. He understands that other countries are putting these tariffs, right, putting these taxes on our services, on our exports. Yeah. And so they don't have a leg to stand on if they want to claim foul play against us. He knows that.
It's interesting to me at this point that the MAGA crowd is not even really trying to argue against the fact that tariffs are bad. And that's because it's a lost cause. This is one of the only things that economists actually agree on. And do you know how rare that is? This is something people need to pay attention to because they're so easily misled by like the experts or an economist said, whereas economists are not all of one mind. There are many schools of thought under economics. There's only one dominant school of thought that's actually taught in American universities, and it's a trash one known as Keynesian economics, and it has been the result of many of the problems that we face here in our country today. I would say there's really only one or two good schools of thought when it comes to economics. That would be the Chicago school and the Austrian school, but those are very, very rarely taught in this country. And so typically when you have experts and economists weighing in, they are coming from a much worse school of thought, in my opinion, than actual economic theory that's based in truth and reality. But despite those differences, when it comes to tariffs, you will see them all fall in line and agree because they are unquestionably stupid and bad. Tariffs will be a tax on you and you will pay it. The people saying, oh, we'll just buy American anyways, that's better, I just want to buy American anyways. You can't. Okay, these industries cannot gear up fast enough to replace the products that you are buying from all over the globe. You don't understand the supply chain. And even if American companies are going to start gearing up and trying to make more stuff here, where do you think they get their supplies? They come from other countries too. That cost gets baked into the end result of the product. And then you also have the additional fact that to make it here is going to be more expensive, again, because of our stupid labor policies. So whether or not you pay a higher price for the goods and services coming into this country from other countries, or if you pay a higher price for the products and services being made by American companies, the end result is the same. You live with much higher prices and are poorer. I did love the Good Morning Liberty guys pointed this out on Twitter. They said the best thing about Trump's tariff proposal is that it forces people on the left to admit taxes on businesses are passed on to consumers. Yes! Like we've been saying this for some time and it's true. Minimum wage laws, any kinds of regulations that you put into place, raising the corporate tax, all of this just gets passed on to you. And if you don't recognize that, you will continue to live with a worse and worse economy where you have less money, less purchasing power, and you will deserve it because you failed to do the basic job you're supposed to do as a citizen to educate yourself and act accordingly. Crowder also tries to make a ridiculous point in this video, basically saying that other countries are placing tariffs on us and thus we should be able to come in and implement our own in return. But like you missed a few steps there because almost the entirety of the existent tariffs that we are facing right now are retaliatory. Like, look at China. The US-China trade dispute resulted in reciprocal tariffs since 2018. The European Union, the EU, has levied tariffs on select US goods as part of a trade dispute, such as the one over subsidies for aircraft manufacturers. Retaliatory tariffs have been targeted to items in the US like whiskey or motorcycles or agricultural products. Turkey and Russia, both countries have imposed tariffs on US exports in response to US trade measures. India, again, raised tariffs on US almonds, apples, and other products in retaliation for the US withdrawing its preferential trade status under the generalized system of preferences. So yes, other countries are doing this to us too, but who started it? And furthermore, why would you not expect the exact same damn thing in response to new tariffs? We're just going to keep upping the ante and tariffing each other until nobody can afford anything. I hate this line that he tries to do this, like the more you understand about tariffs and they're just a bargaining tool, like the smarter you'll be. I hear this all the time online. Trump is just playing chess. You don't get it. He's a great debater. He's a great negotiator. He's a negotiating genius. Here's a few examples of this brain-broken argument online. Do you actually believe that will go through? You're a fool. Dude, it's a negotiation tactic. Tariffs are leverage. Tariffs are a negotiation tactic. Art of the deal stuff. Always have a credible threat that you can unsheath if needed. Senator Chuck Grassley downplayed Trump's threats of broad tariffs against major U.S. trading partners as a negotiating tool, but he did note concern regarding the potential for another trade war. U.S. farmers are still reeling from Trump's 2018 actions. Yes, they are. Because guess what? They're not a negotiation tool. He's serious about them. He actually just hates free trade and always has. There is no evidence that this guy is a brilliant chess player. He's had one piece of public policy he seems to have been overly concerned with and focused on for the past couple of decades, and yet he doesn't even understand it. And his first term tariffs, which by the way did go into place because the negotiation did not work, they were a disaster, as were Biden's continuation of them. As my friend Chris Spangle said, a crippled supply chain was why goods were so expensive after COVID. Demand stays the same, supply decreases, price increase, basic economics. I've repeatedly said for years that Trump caused the inflation and people scoffed. He shut down the country and then sent everyone 3 checks. You're about to experience his genius at work again. He's not a genius. He actually is responsible for much of the economic woes that we have been living with for the past 4 years. And don't tell me like, oh, he got bullied into it. He got caught off guard. hard. He'll do differently next time. No, he was the bully. He tried to primary the one Republican who stood up to him in the midst of all this mess, which was Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, who's a libertarian, but he's a Republican. He tried to primary him. He tried to get him thrown out of office because he dared to stand up to him and say basic common sense economic truths. No, Trump was responsible for beginning the crazy spending that we saw during 2020. He was responsible for bullying Congress to push it through. He was responsible for the Fed printing all of those dollars that they had to print in order to keep up with all of the spending. He was responsible for shutting the country down and letting that whole agenda proceed. He sucks. And not only did he cripple the supply chain and create inflation in 2020, his tariffs were already doing damage. Like, we had already had to bail the farmers out of his moronic trade policies and tariffs in 2018. The Chinese tariffs, which targeted U.S. agricultural exports such as soybeans and pork and other products in retaliation to our tariffs, hurt American farmers, leading to significant losses. And in response, the Trump administration provided financial aid to farmers totaling about $28 billion, which still did not fully compensate for the lost markets and revenue. Like, good God, I understand people don't have a long memory, but to not remember as far back as 2018 is inexcusable. And then, as NBC notes, though Vice President Kamala Harris criticized Trump's tariffs threats as unserious during her failed bid for the presidency, the Biden-Harris administration actually retained the taxes the Trump administration imposed of a $360 billion in Chinese goods and imposed a 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. So all of that has continued to combine and escalate over the past 4 years and lead to the economic devastation that we have been living with. Trump is inherently attached to it. Biden sucked. Kamala would have sucked, but Trump also sucks. And all of this seems to fly right over Steven's head. In fact, he even goes so far in this video to credit Trump's tariffs with keeping Ford plants in the country.
Like in 2017, remember the threat of a tariff from Donald Trump if they moved their plant to Mexico?
For Ford, yeah.
Yeah, it was Ford, and they canceled it. Ford canceled that plant, remember?
Yeah.
Oh yeah? How did that play out, you might ask? Well, since 2017, when all of this went down, Ford has faced challenges in both global competition and workforce stability. Despite successfully expanding its electric vehicle lineup, the company has experienced significant financial pressures and market shifts because you didn't fix the conditions that were pushing them out of the country in the first place. You just handcuffed them here. Recently, Ford has implemented layoffs, including over 3,000 jobs in 2022 and further reductions in 2024. They reported losses of over $1 billion in early 2024. While this move created allegedly 700 new positions in Michigan for electric and autonomous vehicle production, layoffs in subsequent years across U.S. facilities, especially tied to shifts in EV production, have diminished those gains. And while the move supported local economies temporarily, Ford's overall costs remained high due to U.S. manufacturing expenses limiting broader economic benefits, and car prices have continued to go up. You geniuses, you brilliant negotiators, you amazing chess players. Moronic, it's abysmally stupid. Like, what you actually needed to do is fix the labor policies, because unions and the labor policies they've lobbied for have decimated American car manufacturing. The unions of the auto industry are pointed to as like the golden age of unions. They got pay raises and cost of living adjustments and enhanced job security, especially for lower paid workers. The people who were lucky enough to work there had amazing jobs. They were paid far beyond the value of their labor. They often got paid to even not work. But because of it, our cars became horse shit, right? Because the companies were having to spend a bunch of money on labor that was not creating the same amount of value. And so they had to curtail the actual product, right? The actual quality of what they were putting out there in order to keep prices somewhat stabilized so that Americans would continue to buy them. The unions crushed American car manufacturing and they pushed the companies overseas. Like, we are our own worst enemy here. And yet the labor secretary pick that Trump just tapped is a union shill. So I have no hope any of this will get better under him. He doesn't even understand the very basics of what needs to change in this country for things to get better. Crowder then goes on to assert that the tariffs will somehow force China and Mexico to fix our immigration system and stop drugs from flowing into our country.
As everyone is aware, thousands of people are pouring through Mexico and Canada, bringing crime and drugs at levels never seen before. Right now, a caravan coming from Mexico, not Dodge, composed of thousands of people, a Pacifica as well, seemed to be unstoppable in its quest to come through our currently open border. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary legal documents to charge Mexico And Canada, a 25% tariff on all products coming into the USA, and it's ridiculous open borders.
And it'll stay in effect until drugs and illegal influx, until that stops.
Yes.
Be applying some major tariffs on China. He said,
I have had many talks with China about the massive amount of drugs, in particular fentanyl, being sent to the USA, but to no avail. Not even some avail. None. Representatives of China told me that they would institute their maximum penalty, that of death, for any drug dealers caught doing this, but unfortunately, they never followed through, and drugs are still pouring into our country, mostly through Mexico, at levels never seen before. Until such time as they stop, we will be charging China an additional 10% tariff above any additional tariffs on all of their many products coming into the United States of America. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
This is like when socialists tell you if we just all share, everybody would be equal and well off and not have to work very much. What are you on? As many people have pointed out, it's quite funny to suggest that tariffs will somehow stop the flow of fentanyl, a drug that is sold illegally and would thus not be privy to tariffs. But secondarily, most fentanyl is being brought into this country by Americans. And the entire flow of illegal drugs into this country will not stop until this government stops creating a black market for them. Product bans do not work. I've said this till I'm blue in the face. They don't work on guns. They don't work on drugs. They don't work on abortion. They don't work on immigration. All you do is create black markets. Whereas if you took the capitalist approach and stopped creating black markets and allowed things to come in legally and be above book, and for people to make their money the right way, which is in offering quality products, not only would you see a higher quality of drugs and less things being laced within them, you would get rid of the criminal activity that accompanies the current flow of those goods into this country. This is why we can't have nice things. Because people would rather grandstand and feel good about themselves and virtue signal like, oh, we're trying to stop the drugs, versus acknowledging that human nature is always present and that some people are always going to want to access things that are bad for them. And the more you try to nanny state and protect them from that, the more harm you cause. Fixing the immigration stream and the drug flow requires much smarter policies than tariffs, which will just pummel Americans while these problems continue to escalate. And while this is not the only factor, immigrants would not be flooding our borders had we not been destabilizing so much of the rest of the world. He spends a lot of time attacking Mexico as like a crappy country, but really, just because people are coming in through the Mexican border does not mean most of those people are Mexicans. You get that, right? Increasingly, the people we've seen coming across the border are Venezuelans, Cubans, Nicaraguans, the Chinese even, Colombians, Ecuadorians, and even Ukrainians. Obviously, if you start digging into the history of those countries and our involvement there, you can probably put two and two together and see we have some responsibility here. I'm all for fixing and streamlining our immigration system and then enforcing our immigration laws. But that again actually requires free market common sense solutions. It is bonkers to say that tariffs will do that, or that other people's countries have the ability to prevent people from fleeing and coming here. Now, one place I don't have an issue with Steven Crowder's video is when he talks about negotiating tariffs. I would say that in light of what he points out here, I might cautiously support reciprocal tariffs as a temporary negotiating tool. The goal would be to pressure the other countries to eventually reduce their tariffs altogether and ultimately move both sides towards a system of real free trade.
So even look, for example, I just gave you the China numbers, but if you look at the EU tariff on American cars, it's 10%, whereas ours is only 2.5%.
Oh my God.
So think about that for a
Those cars helped the Nazis.
You know, so Americans here, you're getting Mercedes, you're getting Audi, you're getting BMW, those cars, and they're not getting a lot of the American cars. Not that all American cars are great, don't get me wrong, it's not lost on me, but there are certainly some cars like large sedans that are really kind of unavailable, and not everyone in the EU can afford European cars. So they have cars that are like Brio and bullcrap you never heard of in the United States.
I'm sure they're all begging for PT Cruisers and Avalanches.
Yes, Chargers. In Japan,
They might, yeah.
In Japan, there's a 15.5% tariff on American agricultural imports. So think about this for a second. You're talking about we just did EU, China, Japan. So only the United States is to bring in stuff with no kind of tariff? No. The ideal scenario is they don't do that, is these other countries don't do that, right? So that way we all have access to more markets internationally. It can be competitive, not an international government, international free markets. But these countries won't do that because in many areas, they're not able to compete.
I'll go back to what I've already said in this video though, which is that the real solution and the better way to get free trade and to get everybody to like cool off this whole trade war would be for Americans to be able to make better products. And that only happens if you fix the labor laws, if you get rid of a lot of the things unions have implemented, if you deregulate, if you actually come in and create a free market capitalist system for which American companies can operate in, if you stop taxing them to death, all of this would lead to a real boom in our economy. America would be more independent if more things could be made here. Take the example of the EU that he gave earlier, where they are charging a 10% tariff on their cars while we are only charging a 2.5% tariff on our cars. Had we not completely obliterated American car manufacturing, then it could actually gear up and start to make quality cars. Quality cars that would also be competitive price point wise with those being made in Europe. Right now, Europe can charge more for their cars because we want them, right? Our cars are shit. But on the other side of the coin, they don't want ours because they're shit. I like that he throws out SUVs as an example, like, oh, Europeans might want our SUVs. Their car companies aren't making those. Homies, Europeans are poor. They can't afford gas for an SUV. No, make it to where American car companies can actually compete, where Americans actually want to buy their own cars, where Europeans actually want to buy their cars. And I promise you that disparity would decrease. They're able to get away with this right now because there is a difference in supply and demand on this product between the countries, all due to our government's ridiculous laws that have made it really difficult to truly compete in many of these markets. You just need to unleash American companies. In conclusion, Trump is not a capitalist. His trade policies are bad and have been proven so not only under his first term, but time and again throughout history. If our schools were actually educating Americans on the basics of history and econ, perhaps we wouldn't keep having to have this conversation over and over and over, but no. Instead, we get to pay more for everything, solve zero problems people actually care about, and probably get ourselves into another world war. Yay! So much to be thankful for. All right, but seriously, I hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. I'm taking the rest of the week off to spend with family. I'll probably post a pic in the community section and would love to see yours too. And on all seriousness, I really am very thankful for all of you this year. You've been so supportive as I've embarked on my new YouTube journey, and I'm appreciative of the politically homeless encampment we're building here. I'll see you next week. All right, guys, I hope you liked this episode. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and if you want even more content, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok.